My name is Manjishtha Bhattacharyya, and I work as a science communicator with Impact Science, which is a branch of practice communications. What we essentially do is work with universities and research institutes and academic societies, academic publishers, and medical and life sciences organizations to disseminate the knowledge or information that the academic community comes up with among the common people, the non-academic community, for societal good. So through our work, we have made an observation that in some domains of knowledge, the information that is generated by the academic communities needs bolstering through inputs by the non-academic community for effecting greater societal good. One such key area where participation of the non-academic community, if we can use the term citizens, is encouraged is in the conservation of biodiversity and natural resources. Biodiversity is a shared resource. So anything that causes loss of biodiversity, it actually can be considered a tragedy of the commons because it affects negatively humanity as a whole at the local level, starting from the local level to the regional and then ultimately the global level. So citizens, including the academic and the non-academic community, should be made stakeholders for conservation of biodiversity. We can question how effective such participation of citizens in conservation program actually is. Here, I would like to introduce the term citizen science, which is what this participation of the non-academic community in scientific endeavors in the West is called. So if we are to evaluate the effectiveness of citizen science programs in conservation of biodiversity, we would have to take examples of some species of animals or plants where such programs have brought about the maximum positive changes. Let us talk about bees, because bees are one of the two flagship insect species at the fore of citizen science programs in the West. For most of us, bees are the winged insects which produce honey, build big combs and live in colonies and sting us when we try to get to that honey. But bees, honeybees, typically are less than 10 species all over the world. However, there are more than about 20,000 different species of bees on the planet. And like I said, by subtracting the 10 species, the majority are bees which do not produce honey, do not live in big colonies, do not build homes, and some of them do not even have stings. These non-apious bees, or colloquially known as the native bee species, are at the fore of citizen science programs in the West, and citizen scientists there in participation in association with the academic community are helping to identify them, monitor their community health and their diversity, as well as the community dynamics to identify the threats that are facing these non-apious bees or the native bees. We could question why. What's the necessity of knowing these native bees? They are not producing honey. Why should we even bother to protect these non-apious bees, these native bees? Why do we have to bother about them? The reason is these bees, even though they do not produce any honey, are vital ecosystem service providers. They are fundamental pollinators of angiosperms, that is the flowering plants, in most ecosystems. In fact, there are certain plants which can be pollinated by only specific native bees. And so if these native bees become extinct, the plant which is dependent on those native bees for pollination will eventually also be faced with, threatened with extinction. So it is in our interest to conserve the pollinators of our cultivated crops, our wild crops, that we need to know about these native bees. It has been estimated that about 75% of all the plants, including the crops as well as the wild plants in the USA, are pollinated by bees, including the honeybees and the native bees. If we talk numbers, then a 2012 studies estimated that in 2009, the honeybees in the USA provided pollination services worth close to 12 billion US dollars. Compared to them, the native bees provided and pollination services worth close to 3.5 billion US dollars. We must remember here that the honeybees are commercially managed to provide pollination services in the West. In India also, there is limited management of honeybees for providing pollination. On the contrary, the native bees are completely unmanaged. They are free agents. Whatever pollination services they provide is when they are out foraging for pollen and nectar to feed themselves and the brood. So, comparing the pollination services of the managed honeybees with the unmanaged native bees, we can understand that it is vital that we continue to provide support for the native bees so that they keep continuing to provide us with the unmanaged pollination services so that we have food on our plates. That is why several societies in the West, at the fore of which is Success Society, has initiated elaborate citizen science programs where communities participate and work together closely with the scientific communities to document these native bees. Because to conserve something, the first thing that we would need is information about them. Know what they are, know what they do, know where they live, what they feed on, and know what threatens them. Besides Success Society, several research institutions, universities, time to time roll out citizen science programs, invite volunteers to participate and help the scientists monitor the bee communities. I was fortunate to be part of one such program in May in 2015. And it is heartening to note that because of the efforts of the citizen scientists, along with the scientists, that today the number of native bees that have been identified has crossed 2,000 and is steadily increasing. Compared to this, if we discuss the situation in India, it is rather disappointing. There is no dedicated citizen science program for bees in this country. But that does not mean we do not have native bees. Starting from the middle of the 19th century, by the efforts of British naturalists and then scientists in this country, close to 100 different species of bees, excluding honeybees, have been documented in the country. However, awareness about these bees is abysmally low among the general population. The fact that our regional languages do not have any specific term to describe the bees which do not produce honey does not help the matter at all. Because if we take, for example, Bengali language, in Bengali, the terms that we have to describe bees is momachi, mopoka, or mo. Derivatives of Sanskrit terms madhumakshika and madhupa, all of which have roots as in the etymology, they are derivatives from words which refer to honey, madhu or mo. So we cannot, our language does not allow us to have terms to describe insects which do not have any other role than to produce honey. Even though Bengali has a term called bhumor or bhumra, which traditionally has been used to identify the black carpenter bees, sometimes it is confused with wasps, and therefore this term to describe the non-apis bees is not sacrosanct. So this linguistic impediment also hinders our understanding, identification, and knowledge gathering about the native bees, or that is my understanding. The result is that even though we have native bees in our vicinity, even though we may see them in our vicinity, we do not identify them, and therefore we do not accord them the importance that is due. A study that I conducted, by which I identified 16 different species of bees in Midnapur, in forested areas in Midnapur, including honeybees, some of which are displayed here. I was disappointed to note that the people living in the immediate vicinity of the areas where the samplings took place saw these insects on a daily basis, but failed to identify them or did not consider them as bees or considered them as pests in some cases, which is alarming because when we are considering an insect a pest, our first instinct will be to treat them as such, to eradicate them. So unknowingly, we may be doing them harm rather than doing them good. However, as part of the same study, I was also able to understand that it takes very little effort to change this perception of people and make them engaged in knowing the bees and identifying them rather than being hostile to them or not caring about them. This actually generates hope that through dedicated extension research in the country, through dedicated public outreach programs, we may change the perception of people and make them aware of these important ecosystem service providers. The implications will be that because people already know and identify honeybees as important insects, if they start associating the native bees with the honeybees, the importance that they provide honeybees with, the same importance will then be accorded to the native bees as well. And therefore, irrespective of their status as honey non-producing bees, they will be given significance, they will be considered important, and they will therefore be protected in nature. So that is where the efforts of citizen science comes in, because the academics, they can only help in help in identifying the bees in an ecosystem, but people need to use that knowledge to apply it on the land and then conserve it in their vicinities. So the first step towards this citizen science approach to conserving bees is to becoming aware about the existence of the native bees. USA has a dedicated research wing of USDS under which they have an inventory where whatever species is identified is listed, and there are extensive photographic documentation of those bees. So a layperson can simply take a photograph, cross-check it against that database and identify it on their own. We do not have such extensive resources in this country. However, in our own limited way, some academics and non-academicians have started ventures wherein the information about the native bees in the country is being offered for public awareness. I have listed some of these here. Second, another step that citizen scientists can do for them for protecting the bees is to start documenting them themselves. First is therefore to know, being aware of the bees that are in the environment. The second is to start documenting them, monitoring their own, their diversity and their community structure, using very simple limited tools at our disposal. People who are interested in macro photography, they can, the photograph on the screen, this was taken by a mobile camera. So people can simply become enthusiasts and start documenting the bees on their own, upload the photographs on the repositories online, and eventually form a database through which knowledge sharing can occur. And that will be a very good step towards bolstering the efforts of the bee scientists in the country. A key trick in documenting bee diversity for enthusiasts, for the citizen scientists, is to be alert and keep vigil of the flowers which bees visit on a daily, regular basis, because they have floral constancy, whereby bees tend to visit the same flower at almost the same time every day. So by observing those flowers at that particular time of the day, we can easily spot the bees that visit them, and we can easily document them. And finally, through our own limited efforts, we can create small bee habits. The terrace garden, the rooftop gardens, or the window sills with flower boxes, these can become good nesting and foraging sites for the lady bees. They are not choosy, they are not picky. What they need is a natural environment where there is plenty of indigenous plants, not exotic plants, because the exotic plants are not their natural food. That is where the native bees will, by their own accord, they'll come and they'll nest and they'll forage. The first picture in this slide, if there's a small burrow on the soil. So this was taken in a garden in Pondicherry, and this is a bee inside that hole, burrowing inside that hole. So these are areas where these native bees typically tend to occur. So no elaborate construction is needed to house these bees. They will visit anywhere and everywhere there are native plants. And what we need to do is to actually leave them space where they can have and forage and fly undisturbed. That is the key term here, to have undisturbed patches of wilderness where the native bees flourish. Another important thing is for native bees as well as honeybees is pesticide spraying and insecticide spraying. We tend to become very enthusiastic when we apply insecticides and pesticides on our gardens as well as on the agri-pastures. But we have to remember that even though meant to destroy the harmful insects, these chemicals also are harmful for the bees. So we have to avoid the timings of spraying these insecticides and pesticides. Bees, including honeybees, tend to forage early in the morning or late in the evening. So avoiding these times for spraying these chemicals would be one of the measures by which we ensure that they are not harmed. Bees provide us with about a third of every bite that we take, whatever food it is, if it is plant origin. And we need them, definitely. But the way the world is changing, and because of our intrusive, destructive nature, because of our tendency to curate carefully our surroundings, to make them cosmetic, we are doing more harm to them than good. So even though we need them more, maybe at this moment, the bees need humans as well. And it doesn't take a lot. It is not rocket science. It simply takes an empathic approach, whereby we just need to become aware of the necessity of their presence, of their identity, and to provide them with their least requirements, the basic requirements, that their nesting sites and their feeding sites, so that we ensure that they are not wiped out. Because if the bees, honeybees or native bees are wiped out, it will be humanity which eventually is wiped out from a lack of food. So it is in the interest of humanity that citizens step in and become enthusiastic about these vital ecosystem service providers and be allies and protect these tiny, minuscule, but nonetheless essential insects.